What is going on, everyone? James Hancock here. I'm back to review Season 2 of Cobra Kai. The entire season is now available on YouTube, and I had an absolute blast this morning ripping through all 10 episodes. Ordinarily, I despise binging shows, in that so many shows these days suffer from this decompressed form of storytelling that makes the entire story feel kind of inert. But with Cobra Kai, I would have happily sat through 10 more episodes then and there. Season 1 was one of the big surprises of 2018 for me. What almost felt like a joke when I first heard about it turned out to be one of the best examples in recent memory of how to make a legacy franchise live and breathe again. Rather than wallowing in 80s nostalgia, this show uses 80s nostalgia as a springboard for a show that embraces the spirit of the 80s while at the same time managing to escape its shadow. All credit goes to creators John Hurwitz, Hayden Schlossberg, and Josh Heald, H-E-A-L-D. I'm not quite sure how that's pronounced, but I'm blown away by what they've accomplished. Because as we've seen on so many occasions recently, most franchises that are a few decades old really struggle with finding that perfect balance between reinventing themselves for the modern era, while at the same time maintaining the audience that has been there from the beginning. I was a few weeks shy of my 8th birthday when I first saw The Karate Kid back in 1984, and it was about the most fun I'd ever had at that point. The movie has more heart than just about any other movie from that period. I watched it countless times on TV, even read the novelization, and stuck with the franchise through Karate Kid 2 and 3, although I should confess that I skipped number 3 in the theater and watched it a few times on HBO instead. My point is that I've been a fan from the beginning, and it thrilled me to no end last spring seeing Cobra Kai become an absolute phenomenon online. Season 1 was so good that I was convinced there was absolutely no way in hell that Season 2 could possibly sustain its momentum, because with Season 1 you had this strong novelty factor on its side, but once the novelty wears off, a show has to survive on its own merits. And I'm thrilled to report that Season 2 is an absolute blast, but I should acknowledge a key distinction. Season 2 takes a little longer to get going, but in the end it's just as entertaining in terms of being an over-the-top high school melodrama with an abundance of karate and 80s nostalgia. The season builds slowly until finally episode 10 just blows the doors off with the best episode of the season, along with several great cliffhangers for Season 3. My one knock might be that it delivers a little less of the social commentary that made the first season so compelling and chooses instead to inject a little bit more soap opera. What was so unusual about Season 1 was the way in which it addressed safe space culture and how it frequently totally fails to empower the kids that safe space practitioners are seeking to protect. If anything, safe space culture has been proven to turn kids and now young adults into emotional cripples who run to the principal's office anytime someone disagrees with them or offends them. And in such a world, Cobra Kai is uniquely equipped to appeal to the outcasts and outsiders looking for a new direction, especially since its sensei, Johnny Lawrence, is completely, totally oblivious to the many ways the world has changed since his glory days back in high school. Season 2 pivots in a sense because we find Johnny confronted with the return of his own sensei, John Kreese, a man with many blind spots and many shortcomings, and Johnny sees that the Cobra Kai philosophy needs some fine-tuning. Strike first, strike hard, no mercy isn't quite working for Johnny anymore, but the question is, how can Johnny be a badass and teach his students to be a badass and still maintain a code of honor? Left alone, he probably could have worked it out in no time, but he has to find this new path, all while constantly being provoked by his old nemesis, Daniel LaRusso, who has started his own rival school, Miyagi-Do, a school designed to be the polar opposite of everything that old school Cobra Kai represented. What this season ends up becoming is a classic case of the tribal warfare one finds between the various cliques in high school, but with the added bonus of the occasional brawl. With all the kids on summer break, the two schools have all the time in the world to train and pick fights with each other, and this rivalry divides old friendships, forges new ones, opens the door to love, romance, and jealousy. But that's about as much as I can say without giving anything away, so if you don't want spoilers, bail out now. But let's start with the cast. All the old faces from Season 1 are back, along with a few familiar faces from the old movies, like Johnny's old friend from Cobra Kai. Their reunion is definitely one of the most emotionally moving parts of the whole season, but we also have a newcomer in the ranks of Cobra Kai by the name of Tori, played by Peyton List. With Samantha and Robbie rapidly falling in love over at Miyagi-Do, Miguel finds himself quickly falling for this new bad girl Tori, who's not only insanely beautiful, but also a diehard fan of martial arts. I should also add that of all the cast members, she actually appears to be one of the few who actually likes practicing martial arts in real life. Any fan of MMA will take note of the way that she throws elbows and knees and how she uses the Muay Thai clinch in fights. But with all the bad blood that's already there between Miguel and Robbie from the previous season, the addition of Tori and Samantha to the equation is like throwing gasoline on a brush fire. I just sat back with a huge smile on my face and basically laughed and cheered for 10 straight episodes, enjoying the fireworks. Now, I can't emphasize this enough. This show is entertaining, even cheesy at times, without an ounce of pretension, which is such a refreshing change of pace from so many shows and movies. Unfortunately, these days, many writers and filmmakers suffer from this nauseating tone of self-importance. They're the kind of people who absolutely love the smell of their own farts and tell each story as if they're delivering a sermon from on high, where the viewer risks being called all kinds of names if they resist complete and total ideological conformity with whatever the filmmaker might be selling. Now, when it comes to Cobra Kai, one can easily read between the lines to determine whatever worldview the writers might have, especially the way they handle topics like cultural appropriation and the patriarchy in a comedic fashion. But they shove nothing down our throats apart from a wild ride that embraces the spirit of the 80s while still feeling refreshingly modern. Even folks who might not see eye to eye with the writers will have absolutely no problem enjoying the petty rivalries that make up so much of the story. What's great is how the story on the surface could be regarded as totally ridiculous, but the actors play it with so much sincerity that this conflict with the lowest possible stakes suddenly seems to be the most important struggle imaginable. William Zabka and Ralph Macchio, they do a brilliant job of getting just as invested in the struggle as their students, leading to a hysterical scene where they end up on date night at tables right next to one another. And when Johnny's date asks what the issue is, Daniel's wife Amanda dismissively says, "Oh, they have warring karate dojos," right before she orders herself a margarita. LaRusso's wife is so completely unimpressed with this ongoing feud, and she just wants to know when she's going to get her husband and business partner back, but her tone perfectly captures the tone of the show. For those individuals at the heart of the rivalry, it is all-consuming, but to the outside world, it's just a storm in a teacup. At any rate, I'm starting to worry that I'm doing a little bit too much pontificating and not calling nearly enough attention to all the things that this season really did well, so I'm just going to rattle off some of my favorite ingredients to make sure I don't forget anything. Johnny makes a few upgrades to his lifestyle this season. He gets what's the equivalent of a Cobra Kai Batmobile and then gets back into the dating scene. And in one of the most outrageously entertaining sequences all season, Johnny has a dream to the tune of Whitesnake's Here I Go Again, where he fantasizes about Miguel's mom in a variety of wild scenarios, some of which include Johnny wearing his karate gi. 80s fans are going to absolutely lose their minds, in particular during certain callbacks to the earlier movies, like the use of Bananarama when the kids return to school in the fall. That song immediately makes you think of Daniel LaRusso getting picked on the soccer field as Johnny and all of his buddies are tripping him and kicking him, and as Allie looks on, Daniel ends up getting thrown off the team. But this season makes excellent use of flashbacks from not only the first movie, but also from the second and third. The best of which had to be when Daniel kicks his way into Johnny's home looking for his daughter. Daniel and Johnny finally throw down, and as they brawl, we see these brilliant flashes of similar exchanges between them 35 years ago during the tournament. And while John Kreese might be a delusional asshole, I must admit, it put a huge smile on my face watching Kreese and Johnny teaching side by side in Cobra Kai. After Johnny parts ways with Kreese, I thought that was it for the character, but the show ended with this phenomenal cliffhanger where Kreese takes Johnny's school, as well as his less merciful students, away from him, which perfectly tees up a major drama in Season 3, where I imagine Johnny and Daniel will end up teaching together to take on Kreese and all of his psychopaths. And speaking of psychos, watching Hawk's journey was equally compelling. We watched him go from nerd to psycho in Season 1, and in Season 2 we see him getting tatted up, we see him dating insanely hot girls, and basically acting precisely like the bullies Johnny and his friends were back in high school. And when he finally gets his comeuppance at the hands of Dimitri, rather than learn his lesson, Hawk goes all in on Kreese's no mercy for the weak philosophy. What totally caught me off guard was a cliffhanger shot much like the post-credit scene from Avengers Infinity War when Nick Fury calls for Captain Marvel. And there's a really deep tease for it. In episode 7, we see Johnny debating whether or not to send a Facebook message to his old high school sweetheart, Allie, who he feels was stolen from him by Daniel. And when someone bumps into him, he accidentally presses send and then thinks nothing more of it. But at the end of the season, in a moment of self-loathing, Johnny chucks his phone away on the beach and doesn't see that Allie has responded with a friend request. And as much as I might love the Marvel Cinematic Universe, I have to admit I got more excited seeing Allie reach out to Johnny than I did seeing the Captain Marvel logo at the end of Infinity War. As a child of the 80s, I was absolutely in love with Elizabeth Shue, and reintroducing her to this cast in Season 3 would be a brilliant twist, especially now that Daniel's suffering from so many problems with his wife due to getting carried away with his new dojo at the cost of everything else. But the best part of the season has to be the many personal rivalries between the two schools. In episode 9, we see the two schools facing off at a party, and even the little kids enrolled in the two schools get in on the action. It makes you wonder why these small kids are at a high school party. Nonetheless, everyone has a nemesis in the opposite camp, which perfectly sets the stage for the final showdown in episode 10. So as you probably gathered, I love this show. I'm dying for a season 3, and very well might start watching season 2 for a second time this evening. If you like season 1, you're definitely going to love season 2. And if you've never watched the original Karate Kid, what are you waiting for? Pop it in. You're going to have an absolute blast. It's a genuine classic from that period. Of all the romantic comedies and action movies that came out in the 1980s, I feel like Karate Kid captures the high school experience better than most. But I've rambled enough at this point, so I'm going to draw the sucker to a close. If you enjoyed this review, please consider subscribing to my channel. I would really appreciate it. If you want to talk more, you can hunt me down on Twitter at Colbrax. There's a link in the description below. But can't thank you enough for the support from my channel. Really appreciate it. But more importantly, as always, onwards and upwards.